The rain hadn't stopped since dawn, and by the time I reached the narrow road that wound past the village, my windshield wipers were smearing more mud than clearing water. I hadn't passed another car in over an hour, just crooked wooden fences and sagging porches staring through sheets of rain. Locals had warned me about Villa Mora, saying it was too quiet in spring, too far from town. But that was exactly what I wanted. Silence, seclusion, no calls, no obligations. The village homes thinned out fast, replaced by towering pines that crowded in from both sides like spectators. Mist clung low to the forest floor, thick enough to slow me down. When I finally spotted the villa between the trees, a squat stone house with moss-covered roof tiles, it looked almost abandoned. The gravel drive was slick, and the wind howled as I stepped out, the forest pressing in all around like it had been waiting. The key was under the mat, just like the owner had said in the email. I let myself in, boots squelching against the old wooden floor as a wave of musty air wrapped around me, stale with dust, damp from long rains. The place had that kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. The living room was small but well kept, stone fireplace, leather armchair, shelves with yellowing books no one had opened in years. I set my bag down and checked my phone. One bar, then none. Typical. I lit a fire, needing the warmth more than I wanted to admit, and stared out the large window as the forest shivered in the wind. The trees leaned with each gust, their shadows stretching long across the walls. Rain tapped steadily against the glass, harder now, like fingers wrapping faster, more deliberate. The fire cracked behind me. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure if I was truly alone in that house, or if something had just noticed me. It started with a sound I couldn't name, somewhere between a creak and a breath, coming from upstairs. I froze, listening, holding the poker loosely in one hand, my body angled toward the staircase. The villa was supposed to be empty. I hadn't checked the upper floor yet, but the door at the top of the stairs had been cracked open when I arrived. I told myself it was the draft, maybe a loose shutter banging in the wind, but the noise didn't repeat. Instead, the rain did. Louder, more frantic, as though trying to drown something else out. I stepped carefully up the stairs, each tread groaning beneath my weight. When I reached the landing, the air felt colder, heavier. I stood in the hallway, breath shallow, and whispered a stupid hello, like that would somehow make me safer. Something shifted in the last room on the left, just a flicker of movement, enough to make my skin crawl. I don't know why I opened that door. Maybe I thought if I saw nothing, the dread coiled in my chest would go away. The hinges groaned, louder than they should have, and the smell hit me first. Mildew, like something had been wet too long. The room was dark, lit only by the gray light from the window. It was bare except for an old dresser and a bed with a sheet draped over it like a shroud. Nothing moved. But then I noticed the dust, thick everywhere except a single path across the floor, like someone had walked recently from the door to the bed and back again. My eyes tracked to the sheet. It was damp in one corner, darker than the rest, like it had absorbed something. I didn't go closer. I backed out slowly, pulling the door shut, heart pounding so loud I was sure it echoed. That was no draft. Someone had been in that room. Maybe still was. Back downstairs, I tried to collect myself, convincing my racing mind that maybe it was just the caretaker checking on the place. But then I saw it, on the fogged window facing the forest. A smear. Not from inside. It was on the outside glass, long and curved, like someone had dragged their fingers across it. I stepped closer, pulse spiking. Beyond the window, the pines loomed like sentinels, unmoving in the sudden stillness. The rain had softened to a whisper. That's when I saw a figure, just for a second, standing between two trees, not walking, not moving, just there. Tall, hunched slightly, as if listening. I blinked and it was gone, like the forest had swallowed it whole. I backed away, every hair on my arms standing up. I didn't know if it had seen me, but I was suddenly certain it had come here on purpose. I locked the front door, then checked the windows, every latch, every bolt, though I wasn't sure what good they'd do if someone, or something, really wanted in. The forest pressed against the glass from every side, like it had crept closer when I wasn't looking. I turned off the lights and crouched near the fireplace, trying to keep out of sight. I watched the tree line through a slit in the curtain. Minutes passed, then movement again, this time closer. A figure stepped between the trees, slow, deliberate, like it was searching. I couldn't see its face, only its shape, and something in its posture made my stomach knot. It stopped at the edge of the trees, just stood there, watching the house, watching me. The wind picked up, carrying with it a low, garbled sound I couldn't place. It wasn't words, it was something older, a sound that didn't belong to anything human. I backed away from the window and sank to the floor, gripping the cold stone of the hearth like it might anchor me. The figure hadn't moved, just a dark silhouette against the pine trunks, barely visible but impossible to ignore. I thought about calling for help, but my phone still had no signal. I tried anyway. Nothing. No bars, no connection, just dead air. Then came a knock, not at the door but somewhere along the back wall, a sharp rap like knuckles against the stone exterior. I jumped, heart jackhammering. No footsteps, no shadow, just that sudden, deliberate knocking from the side of the house facing the deeper woods. I crawled into the kitchen and turned off the last light. As soon as the bulb went dark, something scraped lightly across the wall outside, dragging, slow. Whatever was out there, it was circling the villa now. My breath came in short, frantic bursts as I crouched in the dark kitchen. The scraping sound stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. For a moment, I dared to believe it was over, that I had imagined it all. But then I heard it again, this time closer, against the back door. A low thud, a heavy, deliberate knock, like something or someone was testing the door's strength. I had to move. I couldn't stay trapped here, waiting. I moved toward the front door, my steps careful, slow. But as my hand reached for the knob, something slammed hard against the back wall of the house, so loud it shook the entire building. I froze, paralyzed by the sudden violence of it. Whatever was outside had no intention of leaving. I could hear the faint rustling of branches like it was moving through the forest, closing in. Whatever it was no longer hiding. I stumbled back from the door, my mind racing. There had to be a way out. I couldn't stay here any longer, trapped with whatever was stalking the house. The windows were locked, but there was a small cellar door at the back of the kitchen. I knew it would be risky, but I had no choice. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the door. The house groaned again. This time, it felt like it was being pressed from all sides. My breath quickened. I fumbled with the lock, the sound of the rain outside deafening. Just as I managed to unlatch it, a sharp crack of wood splintered from the living room, the front door. It was breaking down. I bolted through the cellar door, shutting it behind me. The cold earth pressed against my back as I crouched low, trying to steady my breathing. Above, the thud of footsteps, slow, deliberate, sounded on the stairs. The cellar was pitch black, but I didn't dare turn the flashlight on. I could hear it above me now, footsteps, slow and measured, moving through the house. Whatever it wasn't in a hurry. It knew I was down here. My heart hammered in my chest, and for the first time, I felt the weight of the isolation, the complete emptiness around me. But then, a miracle, a faint signal, a single bar on my phone. I didn't hesitate. I dialed the first number that came to mind, emergency services. The phone barely rang before a voice answered. I whispered into the receiver, half in tears. "I'm at Villa Mora. Something's out here. Please hurry." The line crackled, but the woman's voice was clear. "Stay inside. We're on our way." I sank to the ground, listening to the silence return, knowing help was on the way. But something told me, deep down, that whatever was out there was still watching. The invitation had come out of nowhere. An old friend from college, a name she hadn't seen in years, messaging her about a weekend getaway. "You'll love it," he wrote. "Quiet place in the hills, just a few of us. You need this." And maybe she did. Olivia hadn't taken a proper break in months, and something about the villa, secluded, ornate, perched above a dense stretch of pine forest, seemed to promise relief. When she arrived, the sun was just dipping behind the hills, the sky bruised with orange and purple. Laughter spilled from the open doors. Friends she hadn't seen in forever, raising glasses under the warm glow of hanging lanterns. The house stood like something out of another century. Carved wood details, stained glass panels, and tall, narrow windows flickering with light. For a moment, she let herself believe this could actually be fun. But when she crossed the threshold, a chill brushed her arms, like the house exhaled. She told herself it was just the evening air. Inside, the villa felt even more pristine. Faded floral wallpaper, high ceilings with dark beams, and soft music playing from an antique radio tucked in the corner. Olivia joined the others in the main room, where a long oak dining table was cluttered with wine bottles, half-melted candles, and scattered travel bags. Old jokes flowed like nothing had changed, and she smiled, nodded, even laughed when expected. But something tugged at her attention. A faint hum beneath the music, like a vibration in her chest that didn't match the rhythm. She blamed the long drive. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. Still, her eyes kept drifting toward the hallway leading to the back of the house, where none of the lights were on. She could have sworn she saw a shape there, a person standing still. But when she blinked, it was gone. The hallway was empty. She shook her head, tried to rejoin the conversation, but the sense of something watching hadn't left her since she stepped inside. The hallway was empty. She shook her head, tried to rejoin the conversation, but the sense of something watching hadn't left her since she stepped inside. By the time dinner was served, Olivia could barely force a bite past the knot in her stomach. The others were laughing, toasting the start of their weekend, but she felt like she was floating just outside the room. Her thoughts kept drifting to the hallway, the dark corners, the way her reflection had looked strange, off, in the mirror by the entrance. She chalked it up to exhaustion, but even the air felt wrong. Heavier, thicker. When she excused herself to use the bathroom, she took the long way around, avoiding the hallway entirely. Inside the bathroom, she closed the door and leaned against it, taking a shaky breath. The silence pressed in. No music, no laughter, just the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, and then for a full second they went out, leaving her in total blackness. When they came back on, the mirror was fogged, but she hadn't run any water. Olivia stared into the fogged mirror, her pulse skittering in her throat. Slowly, letters began to form on the glass, one by one, as though traced by an invisible fingertip. "You shouldn't have come." Her breath hitched. She backed away, nearly knocking over the waste bin, eyes fixed on the words as they hung in the mist. The air had turned icy, and she could see her breath now, coiling white in the dim light. Then the doorknob behind her twitched, just once, a sharp jolt. She yanked the door open and bolted into the hallway. The lights were still on. Laughter echoed faintly from downstairs. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. She glanced back at the bathroom. The mirror was clear, spotless. No writing, no steam, just her pale, shaken reflection. When she rejoined the group, no one even noticed she was gone. But Olivia couldn't stop scanning the walls and corners. The villa wasn't just unfamiliar now. It felt hungry. The atmosphere had shifted. The laughter downstairs sounded forced now, tinny and distant, like a bad recording played on a loop. Olivia sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, her drink untouched. Across from her someone was speaking, but the words barely registered. The walls of the modern villa felt tighter, the air thicker. She caught sight of her reflection again, this time in the large window opposite the fireplace. But something was wrong. Her reflection wasn't sitting. It was standing. Olivia blinked, heart thudding, and the figure vanished. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "I need some air," she mumbled, but no one responded. It was like she wasn't there. As she stepped into the hallway, the lights overhead flickered once, then again. A whisper slid past her ear, not in any language she understood, just breath. Cold, deliberate breath. She turned sharply. The hallway behind her was empty, but the feeling remained. She wasn't alone. The hallway led to a guest bedroom, dimly lit by a single bedside lamp. Olivia stepped inside and shut the door behind her, needing a barrier, even a thin one. The villa's silence pressed in, too complete, like the house itself was holding its breath. She leaned against the wall, forcing herself to breathe, to think. Then something tapped the window. Not a branch, a rhythmic, intentional knock, 3 soft taps. She moved slowly toward it, her skin crawling. Beyond the glass, the garden was empty. But as she leaned closer, her breath caught. A face, pale, gaunt, and hollow-eyed, was reflected beside hers in the glass. She spun around, but no one was there. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, heart hammering. She yanked it open, only to find the hallway dark now, the light gone completely. And down at the far end, where the stairs turned, something moved, slowly retreating like it wanted her to follow. Olivia stood frozen in the doorway, torn between the primal urge to flee and the suffocating pull of whatever had just vanished around the corner. Her breath came in shallow bursts, ears straining in the thick silence. Then she heard it again, faint footsteps, padding softly across the wooden floor above. No one else should have been upstairs. Everyone was either outside or asleep in their rooms. She backed into the bedroom and shut the door, clicking the lock with shaking fingers. Just as she turned, the lamp flickered violently and died, plunging her into darkness. A soft hum started, low, vibrating through the floorboards like the villa itself was groaning. From under the door, a shadow began to pool, not cast, but forming, spreading like ink. Olivia stepped back until her legs hit the bed. The shadow paused, then receded, as if it had sensed her fear. The air grew colder. Whatever was in the villa, it had just found her. The temperature dropped so fast Olivia could see her breath. The windows fogged, and a soft tapping began on the glass, too rhythmic to be rain. She crept to the window and wiped a small circle clear. Nothing outside. Just the garden drenched in moonlight, the trees unnaturally still. Then, just as she turned, the tapping resumed, this time on the other side of the room, the opposite window. Her stomach turned. She hadn't imagined it. Slowly, she backed toward the hallway, heart hammering. But as her hand reached for the doorknob, the shadow returned, crawling under the door again like a living mist. She stumbled back as the bedroom light blinked on for a split second. In that flash, she saw a figure in the corner, tall, pale, its face smeared as if half erased. Then darkness again. When the door creaked open on its own, Olivia ran, barefoot and breathless, the shadow whispering behind her with every step. Olivia sprinted down the hall, the house warping around her, walls pulsing slightly, doors narrowing, as if the villa itself didn't want her to leave. The others were nowhere. The music had stopped completely, and the air was filled with a low, vibrating hum, like the house was holding its breath. She burst into the living room, expecting to see her friends, but it was empty. The candles were all extinguished. Only the fireplace remained lit, its flames flickering wildly in every direction. Shadows clung to the walls like stains, and the floorboards beneath her feet seemed to sigh with every step. Then a sound, faint, muffled, came from behind her. A voice, her name, spoken in a whisper that echoed unnaturally. She turned slowly. There, just past the archway to the kitchen, was one of her friends, Anna. But her head was tilted too far, and her eyes, they weren't blinking. They weren't human. Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. Anna's eyes, wide and vacant, stared back at her, a hollow abyss where there should have been warmth and recognition. The figure took a step forward, its limbs moving too stiffly, too unnaturally. Olivia stumbled back, her mind racing. This wasn't Anna. Not anymore. She turned and ran toward the front door, but as her fingers grasped the handle, the floor groaned beneath her, and the door slammed shut with a force that nearly knocked her over. Panic surged as the walls around her began to close in, the house contracting like a living thing. A cold gust of air whipped through the room, and the shadowy figure of Anna moved closer, the distorted whisper growing louder. "You shouldn't have come." The words were hollow, filled with something ancient and dreadful. The villa, the walls, the air, they weren't just haunted, they were alive, and they wanted her.